The Mississippi night was thick with heat. Crickets buzzed in the dark fields, and the small town of Philadelphia lay quiet under the summer sky. But the silence was broken when headlights appeared on a lonely country road. Inside the car were three young men, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner. They were civil rights workers, barely older than college kids, but with the courage to face danger in a place where their very presence was unwelcome. They had been in town registering black citizens to vote, standing up against intimidation. Now, as they drove down the empty road, they felt the weight of eyes watching them. Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights appeared in the rearview mirror. A patrol car sped up behind them, siren cutting through the still night. Their stomachs dropped. They knew this wasn't just a traffic stop. In Mississippi, in 1964, this could mean something far worse. The car pulled over to the side of the road. A deputy stepped out, his flashlight blinding as it hit the windshield. The young men exchanged nervous glances. They were used to harassment, used to being followed, but something in the air tonight felt different. The deputy ordered them out of the car. His voice was steady, but behind it was a chilling certainty. He wasn't just enforcing the law, he was enforcing fear. Minutes later, as their car was impounded and they were taken into custody, the three men realized this was no routine arrest, and deep down, they knew they might not make it out alive. Hours later, their car would be found burned to ashes in the woods, and the three young men would vanish without a trace. When news broke, the nation erupted. This wasn't just another case of intimidation. This was murder. And when the FBI came to town, everything changed. To understand how it came to this night, we have to rewind. The story doesn't begin on that Entree road. It begins months earlier, with three men who believed in justice, walking into the most dangerous fight of their lives. James Chaney was from Mississippi, a young black man who had grown up knowing the daily sting of racism. He had seen friends beaten, neighbors denied basic rights, and families threatened for trying to vote. By the time he joined the civil rights movement, he already carried the scars of a lifetime in a divided land. But he also carried hope. He believed change was possible, even if it meant risking everything. Andrew Goodman was just 20 years old, a college student from New York. He had grown up in a comfortable home, far from the violence of the South. But when he heard about the fight for civil rights, he knew he couldn't just sit back and watch from a distance. His parents didn't want him to go. They worried about his safety. But Goodman told them he had to be part of history, had to stand on the right side of justice. Michael Schwerner, older than the other two, was already a dedicated activist. Like Goodman, he came from New York, and he had thrown himself into the movement, organizing voter registration drives, pushing against the walls of segregation. He was fearless, outspoken, and marked as a troublemaker by those who wanted to keep the old order alive. Together, the three formed an unlikely team. Different backgrounds, different lives, but the same mission: to bring democracy to a place where it was being denied. But Mississippi in 1964 was a powder keg. The summer would later be called Freedom Summer, a time when hundreds of young volunteers came south to help register black voters. For them, it was a chance to fight for justice. For the people who wanted to maintain segregation, it was war. Cross burnings lit up the night skies. Churches that welcomed civil rights workers were set on fire. Volunteers were beaten, jailed, and threatened. Every step was a risk. And in Philadelphia, Mississippi, the Ku Klux Klan was watching. The FBI knew tensions were rising, but even they didn't expect what would happen next. The FBI knew tensions were rising, but even they didn't expect what would happen next. One Sunday afternoon in June 1964, Chaney, Goodman, and Schwerner drove to inspect a church that had been burned down. It wasn't an accident. It was arson. punishment for the congregation's support of voter registration. As they left the smoldering remains behind, they noticed cars following them. Shadows in the rearview mirror, men who wanted them gone. That night, as they drove back toward town, the patrol car appeared. Red and blue lights flashing, a deputy waiting for them. It was a setup. They were taken into custody on false charges, locked in a cell for hours. No phone calls, no warnings, just silence. By the time they were released, it was dark. Their car headlights cut through the Mississippi night as they drove away, unaware that members of the Klan were already waiting down the road. Minutes later, the three young men disappeared. When their car was found burned in the woods, the news exploded. Across America, television screens showed the story of three missing civil rights workers. Parents in the North were horrified. Activists in the South were terrified. The White House was watching closely. And that's when it happened. For the first time in history, the federal government sent the FBI deep into Mississippi to investigate a racially motivated murder. An army of agents poured into the small town of Philadelphia, their black suits and shiny cars standing out against the dusty roads. Locals whispered, some cheered. Many scowled. The FBI wasn't welcome here. But this time, it didn't matter. The murder of three young men had changed everything. And what the FBI was about to uncover would shock the nation to its core.
The first thing people noticed was the cars. Black sedans rolling down the dusty streets of Philadelphia, Mississippi, their polished hoods reflecting the blazing summer sun. Suits stepped out, men with serious faces and briefcases in hand. They weren't locals, and they didn't belong here. Everyone knew who they were. The FBI had come to town. For the small community, it felt like an invasion. Some residents lined the sidewalks to stare, their arms crossed, their expressions sharp with hostility. Others stood quietly, watching with a mix of relief and fear. For the first time in history, the full weight of the federal government had descended on Mississippi to investigate a racially motivated crime. Inside a hastily assembled command post, agents unfolded maps across long wooden tables. Red pins marked the last known movements of James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner. Photos of their faces were taped to the wall. Chaney, local to Mississippi, determined and steady-eyed. Goodman, the young college student from New York, fresh-faced and idealistic. Schwerner, older, hardened, with a stare that refused to back down. The agents knew the stakes. The nation was watching. The White House was waiting for answers. And every second that passed without finding the three men was another second of agony for their families. But in Mississippi, the FBI was not welcome. Sheriff's deputies offered little help. Local law enforcement dragged their feet, slow to answer questions, quick to remind the agents that they were outsiders. Rumors swirled through town. Some whispered that the young men had fled the state. Others claimed they were hiding, but the agents had seen enough burned churches and hostile glares to know the truth. Something terrible had happened. And someone in this town knew exactly what it was. The FBI began to search. Agents, volunteers, and locals. Officers combed through fields, swamps, and forests under the scorching Mississippi sun. Men with shovels poked at the soil. Boats dragged through muddy rivers. Dogs sniffed through tall grass. Day after day, they searched. Sweat pouring down their faces. Mosquitoes biting at their skin, the hopelessness growing heavier. Then they began to find bodies. Not the three they were looking for, at least not yet. Instead, shallow graves began to reveal something no one expected. Black men, victims of violence who had never been reported, never been searched for, never been mourned outside their families. One by one, bodies surfaced, proof of the brutality that had been buried under Mississippi soil for decades. The FBI agents felt the weight of history pressing down on them. This wasn't just about Chaney, Goodman, and Schwerner anymore. This was about generations of silence, finally being unearthed. Still, the three missing activists remained unfound. Weeks dragged into months. Pressure mounted from Washington. The families pleaded for answers. And in Mississippi, the air grew thick with tension. Behind closed doors, whispers spread through the town. Some people knew what had happened. Some had even seen it. But fear kept them quiet. Fear of the Klan. Fear of neighbors. Fear of becoming the next body in the ground. The FBI tried everything. They interviewed locals. They offered rewards. They leaned on informants. But walls of silence met them at every turn. Then one night, an informant cracked. In a dimly lit motel room, with the curtains drawn tight, an FBI agent leaned across a table toward a nervous man. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette, smoke curling into the stale air. Finally, he whispered the words the agents had been waiting for. They didn't just disappear. The Klan took them, and the sheriff's office was in on it. The agent froze, his pen hovering, G over the notebook. This wasn't just murder. This was conspiracy. A crime planned and carried out by men sworn to uphold the law out past the fields. They didn't want them found. The FBI had their lead. Agents scrambled into action. Cars roared down the back roads, headlights slicing through the night. Shovels dug into the earth. Flashlights sweeping across the dark soil. And then, at last, the earth gave up its secret, a shallow grave. 3 bodies. James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, Michael Schwerner. Their faces were gone. Their bodies battered, but their names were now etched into history. The FBI stood in silence around the grave, their expressions grim. This wasn't just the end of a search. This was the beginning of something far larger. Because what they had uncovered wasn't just murder, it was a plot that reached into the heart of the town itself. And when the truth came out, it would shake America to its core.